In this last video lesson, we're gonna talk about animation in Maya. We started in the previous video to introduce the basic concept and the time slider here in the bottom part of the interface. And so right now I'm just sliding back and forward the CTI or current time indicator to show you how in the previous video we set up an animation for the camera. So you can create cameras which can be used for static renderings or for video animation, 3D animation. And right here you can also see the path of the animation, which is something that I'm gonna show you in just a bit so that we can manage better the animation. So in this video we're going to continue to talk about animating other objects and lights and materials, and we're gonna do also a tour of other tools concerning animation. So right now I'm moving inside the camera here that I used in the previous video to also show you some additional effects like the depth of field or DOF or DOF, which can be achieved by setting up the f-stops. And that's something that you usually do also in reality. So in the 3D software, usually you have the same settings that you have in reality. So they just simulate what happens in reality. And here, this is the animated camera. And in this animated camera, in this moving camera, you can also see another effect, which is called the motion blur. And that's another effect which intends to simulate what happens in the real world. So when we have moving objects, when we are moving with the camera, we're gonna have a little or more motion blur. Now I've just created here a quick preview of the animation. You can do that by hitting the preview button. I'm gonna show you that again. But this is, you can see here, really pixelated because the resolution is really low. And we also have some heads-up display there that we need to turn off. So we can start to set up here the preview for the animation. Now, if you want to proceed in 3D animation and 3D renderings, I definitely suggest you give a look to V-Ray. And this is the button there for the preview. And you can also get it from there. It's called Play Blast, and if you click on the little square, you're gonna find some options. So I was telling you, if you want to do animation, I think that a good software is V-Ray. Well, it's actually a plugin, or you can use Lumion or Twinmotion or Unreal Engine and so on. But you will find other guides and courses in the channel, or you can write for your comments. You can ask for assistance. You can type your questions. So you can see here I'm setting up a little bit the Play Blast, which is the preview. So I'm setting up here the entire time slider. So I don't want to set a start and end keyframe or frame. And here I'm setting format AVI and quality 100%. And you can also render a sequence of images. So if you do that, you will have a lot of images that then you will have to use in After Effects or Premiere Pro or another video editing tool to create the animation later. But that's gonna be higher quality because AVI is it's compressed. It's a format that it's really compressed. So you're gonna always have something again, which is kind of a preview. And this is Maya Lite. So if you want to do better animation, better renderings, you can go to Maya full version, which is more expensive and has a lot of features like more advanced render engine. So everything is set up here. I'm gonna run the Play Blast. It's gonna show me there the preview of what's happening in the bottom left viewport. So I just need to all the different frames to be rendered, and then this is the animation right here. You can see that the quality is higher, and I can even see the selected objects and the edges there, which are part of the structure. So you can definitely see everything that you want to see in the viewport. You can see it in the animation. Again, this is a really basic quality animation, but can do the trick in many occasions. So it can be useful for you if you are perhaps an architect, you want to show your project real quick animation, or you want to see something in draft. You can also use different viewport styles there. And if you render wireframes, you're gonna see wireframes. If you render textures, you're gonna see textures. If you're not, you cannot see them, and so on. So it's a pretty basic tool, but it can do the trick many times. So I definitely suggest you give it a look. And just as any other tool here concerning rendering material slides in Maya Lite, you can use a standard version here, a basic version, just to start to learn about these topics, and then you can move forward in Maya Professional version or in another software or render engine or plugin like V-Ray. Okay, so you can see here the movement. It's represented by this curve, and I can now click on that curve and get those keyframes. Those are the keyframes that I have created in the previous video, and right now we are not seeing them only in the time slider below, but also here in the viewport. And just as I can see them, I can edit them. They will work like a curve basically. And there are many ways you can edit the animation in a more advanced fashion, and I'm going to show you those additional panels in just a minute. First of all, let me show you something concerning the basics here. We always start from the bottom, then we go to the higher levels of difficulty. So the basic facts is that we have keyframes and interpolation frames. So keyframes are the most important because they are defining the rest of the animation. Now, if you see here, we have a lot of examples in Google if we search for it. Now, when in the past we did cartoon animations, we need to draw each single frame. So we need to have something different in each single frame. And then when we saw the frames all together as a sequence, we had the illusion of animation. Using the keyframes instead, we just need to set up the keyframe and the rest is done by the software. So this is pretty handy. So all the other frames which are not keyframes are called interpolation frames. And in the past, you could have like 10 frames per second, but at the moment, the best is like 30 or 100 frames per second. So those 100 frames are not all gonna be keyframes, just a few gonna be keyframes. All the others are gonna be interpolation frames. And in the past, we probably had like 10 FPS or frame per second. So FPS means frame per second, and it's a value that also can be called frame rate. So how many frames are passing through a second of animation. You can have something like stop motion, and then you probably will lower the value like 10 FPS. Or you can have some really nice fluid animation with 25 already FPS or 30 FPS. And this is a term that usually you see in video games and also in video game producing like with Unreal Engine. You will always keep an eye on the frame rate. So you can see again many examples that are gonna show you a little bit better what this means. But basically, if you need to render an animation of 10 seconds, you will need at least 25 frames per second, so 250 renderings. This is why animation is pretty, let's say, difficult to do. Well, it's more difficult to create animation than to create static renderings. And